Hi guys, it's Joe Tommaso from the 15 Minutes With podcast. Our show is geared toward helping to keep not only teens but people in general out of our jails and prisons. Our show is unique in the fact that we use real inmates throughout the country and they explain not only about the cases that caused their incarceration, but why it's so important for people to stay out of prison and remain free. Speaking of free, have you heard about the newest and best way to put your podcast out there for the world to hear? Let me tell you about Anchor. Anchor is the easiest way to produce and distribute your ideas, your podcast, and the best part, it's free. There's even a creation tool that allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. Anchor will even distribute your podcast for you so people can hear it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many other listening platforms. You can even make money from your podcast, and there are no minimal amount of listeners required. Anchor is everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So what are you waiting for? Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm and get started.
Hey everybody, hope everybody's doing great. This is Joe Tommaso and you're listening to this edition of 15 Minutes With. 15 Minutes With is currently listened to on 19 different platforms, including YouTube, Spreaker, and Anchor. And if you'd like to help me keep this on the air so you guys can keep hearing the content, please, by all means, this is your free way to do so. You can click the like and the subscribe buttons. If you want to get notified whenever I drop new content, please, by all means, click the notification bell as well. If you want to help me not only keep this show on the air, but help it get better, please, by all means, donate to paypal.me/Joe Tommaso. That is paypal.me/JoeTomaso. And if you have any comments, suggestions, or if there is somebody you want me to interview in particular, please, by all means, send me an email. Let me know. The email is insidetherazorwire@gmail.com. Again, that email is insidetherazorwire@gmail.com. Or you can old-fashioned snail mail me at P.O. Box 162, West Haven, Connecticut 06516. Again, that is P.O. Box 162, West Haven, Connecticut 06516. Okay, guys, a lot of the listeners reached out to me and said, hey, Joe, can you tell us about Jeffrey Epstein? We want to hear about Jeffrey Epstein. So for those of you who don't know who Jeffrey Epstein is, he is a former financier. He passed away due to suicide at the Metropolitan Detention Center, which is a detention center run in Manhattan, New York. It's run by the Federal Bureau of Prisons. He passed away there on August 10th of 2019 while he was awaiting trial for sex trafficking charges that took place in New York as well as Palm Beach, Florida. Jeffrey Epstein was born January 20th, 1953 in Brooklyn, New York, and as I stated, he passed away due to hanging on August 10th, 2019 in Manhattan, New York. He was a financier, but he was not always a financier. Given his charges, this is a good thing as well. So he started off as a teacher. Thank God that did not keep going in that direction. He was teaching physics and math at Dalton School in Manhattan. Believe it or not, he was hired for that position by Donald Barr, who was the former Attorney General William Barr's dad, to work in that position at the Dalton School. Epstein then switched to banking and financing. Back in 2005, he was arrested in Palm Beach after someone complained he had molested their 14-year-old. He did serve 13 months, but most of that was on work release. When you got money, you can pretty much buy your way out of anything. He actually paid to be on work release, so he paid to be free while he was there. He also made an undisclosed settlement. There was a non-disclosure in that case. The feds at that point had actually identified 36 victims as young as age 14. That is 36 victims back in 2005 alone in that case. He was arrested again on July 6, 2019 in New York, and that is when he was charged with the trafficking charges in both New York and Florida. So we're going to go over what the actual indictment reads regarding Epstein's arrest. So here we go. As set forth herein, over the course of many years, Jeffrey Epstein, the defendant, sexually exploited and abused dozens of minor girls at his homes in Manhattan, New York, and Palm Beach, Florida, among other locations. In particular, from at least in or about 2002 up until and including the least in about 2005, Jeffrey Epstein, the defendant, recruited and caused to be enticed and recruited minor girls to visit his mansion in Manhattan, New York, the New York residence, and his estate in Palm Beach, Florida, called the Palm Beach residence, to engage in sex acts with him after he would give the victims hundreds of dollars in cash. Now, I just want to tell you guys, you've heard of the Epstein before. Epstein's been linked to the Clintons and to Prince Andrews. In fact, when he passed away, there was all kinds of stuff that happened where they couldn't find the videos of his cell. Conveniently, the guards that were charged to watch him, the guards that were supposed to be watching him, they did not check on Epstein for over 14 hours. And magically, there's no camera footage either. So there was some conspiracy themes that were going around there. But I can tell you from what I'm going to read you, Epstein definitely killed himself. He gave the victims hundreds of dollars. Moreover, in order to maintain and increase his supply of victims, he also paid certain of his victims to recruit additional girls to be similarly abused by him. This way, he created a vast network of underage victims for him to sexually exploit in locations including New York and Palm Beach. Epstein also had a private island. He also had a plane. This guy, I mean, it's amazing what you can do when you have money and how you can avoid prison. But as we all know, this caught up with him finally back in July of 2019. The victims described herein were as young as 14 years old at the time they were abused by Jeffrey Epstein, the defendant, and were, for various reasons, often particularly vulnerable to exploitation. Epstein intentionally sought out minors. He knew that many of his victims were in fact under the age of 18, including because in some instances the minor victims actually told them their age. In creating and maintaining this network of minor victims in multiple states to sexually abuse and exploit, Jeffrey Epstein, the defendant, worked and conspired with others, including employees and associates, who facilitated this conduct by, among other things, contacting victims and scheduling their sexual encounters with Epstein at the New York residence and the Palm Beach residence. During all time periods charged in this indictment, Jeffrey Epstein, the defendant, was a financier with multiple residents in the continental United States, including the New York residence and the Palm Beach residence. Beginning in at least 2002, Jeffrey Epstein, the defendant, enticed and recruited and caused to be enticed and recruited dozens of minor girls to engage in sex acts with him, after which Epstein paid the victims hundreds of dollars in cash at the New York residence and the Palm Beach residence. In both New York and Florida, Jeffrey Epstein, the defendant, perpetuated this abuse in similar ways. Victims were initially recruited to provide massages to Epstein, which would be performed nude or partly nude, and would become increasingly sexually in nature. This would typically include one or more sex acts. Epstein paid his victims hundreds of dollars in cash for each encounter. Moreover, Epstein actively encouraged certain of his victims to recruit additional girls to be similarly sexually abused. Epstein incentivized his victims to become recruiters by paying these victim recruiters hundreds of dollars for each girl they brought to him. In doing so, he maintained a steady supply of new victims to exploit. The New York residence. At this time, relatives to the indictment, Jeffrey Epstein, the defendant, possessed and controlled a multi-story private residence on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, New York, i.e., This was called the New York residence. Between at least in or about 2002 and in or about 2005, he abused numerous minor victims at the New York residence by causing these victims to be recruited to engage in paid sex acts with him. When a victim arrived at the New York residence, she typically would be escorted to a room with a massage table where she would perform a massage on Jeffrey Epstein, the defendant. The victims, who were as young as 14 years old, were told by Epstein or other individuals to partially or fully undress before beginning the massage. This guy was sick. Anyways, during the encounter, Epstein would escalate the nature or scope of the physical contact with his victim to include, among other things, sex acts such as groping and direct and indirect contact with the victim's genitals. Epstein typically would also masturbate during these sexualized encounters, asked the victims to touch him while he masturbated, and touched the victim's genital with his hands or with sex toys. In connection with each sexual encounter, Jeffrey Epstein, the defendant, or one of his employees or associates paid the victims in cash. Victims typically were paid hundreds of dollars in cash for each encounter. Jeffrey Epstein, the defendant, knew that many of the New York victims were underage, including because certain victims told him their age. They actually said, "I am 14 years old. I am 15 years old." Further, once these minors were recruited, many were abused by Epstein on multiple subsequent occasions at the New York residence. Epstein sometimes personally contacted the victims to schedule appointments at the residence. In other instances, he directed employees or associates, including a New York-based employee, which is known as employee number 1, to communicate with victims via telephone and arrange for these victims to return to the New York residence for additional sexual encounters. Okay, so we're going to come out of this right now. We know this happened both in New York and in Palm Beach. There are other people, employees, that he paid. If he didn't call them himself, he had these people call. Epstein's also known to have gone on a plane, which was dubbed Lolita 1. Okay, and on this plane, it is known that he had at least one former U.S. president, as well as Prince Andrew himself on that plane. They were also at the island. And it's really funny how these guys say they didn't know Epstein when there's pictures, hundreds of pictures out there of Epstein with these people. Now, a lot of people are saying that Epstein didn't kill himself, somebody got to him, etc., etc. I am going to give you guys some inside information that is not known via court papers, via anything, okay, except direct communications from myself and someone else who is a former cellmate of Jeffrey Epstein. However, I do want to bring up the fact that 2 corrections officers, one by the name of Tova Noel and another corrections officer by the name of Michael Thomas, have been indicted after Epstein was found hung in a cell. They were indicted, and I'm going to give you a little bit of their indictment as well. On or about August 10th, 2019, Tova Noel and Michael Thomas, the defendants, were in dereliction of their duties as corrections officers at the Metropolitan Correctional Center, or MCC, which is also known as the Metropolitan Detention Center, which is run by the Bureau of Prisons, repeatedly failed to perform mandated counts of prisoners under their watch in the MCC's Special Housing Unit, also known as SHU. Instead, for substantial portions of their shifts, Noel and Thomas sat at their desks, browsed the internet, and moved around the common area of the SHU. And to conceal their failure to perform their duties, Noel and Thomas repeatedly signed false certifications attesting to have conducted multiple counts of the inmates when in truth and in fact they never conducted such counts. As a result of those false statements, the MCC believed prisoners in the SHU were being regularly monitored and accounted for when in fact they weren't. So no correctional conducted any count or a round of the SHU from approximately 10 8:30 p.m. August 9th until 6:30 a.m. August 10th, at which time, and alleged herein, Noel and Thomas discovered the body of MCC inmate Jeffrey Epstein, who had committed suicide overnight while unobserved. So Thomas and Noel were working here. Now, it's well known that the staffing for the Bureau of Prisons in general, not just New York, but Bureau of Prisons in general, is at low points. They do not have enough staff. They need to recruit more people. These guys and women are working numerous shifts back to back. They're not getting breaks in between. Some of them are working 16 hours and then going back and coming back for another 16 hours and then getting ordered back for another 16 hours, and they're not getting breaks in between. So a lot of these people are physically exhausted. Is that an excuse to not perform your duties? Absolutely not. Would Jeffrey Epstein have been alive right now to face these charges that he was facing had these officers performed their job? You can't say yes, you can't say no, but what you can say is the Bureau of Prisons, the Federal Bureau of Prisons, failed Jeffrey Epstein on numerous levels. Not only did these officers not conduct their count because they took it for granted. You have to remember, these inmates are counted not just for the fact of, are they there? Are they okay? Okay, you have people who are on the 10th floor in 10 South, which is where the special housing unit is. They're complaining about inhumane conditions. We're talking rats. We're talking bugs. We're talking cold food. During the winter last year, one of the BOP's facilities in New York actually had a power failure that lasted several days. The Red Cross tried to assist them by bringing in blankets. You had inmates flashing, pen lights trying to get attention because they were literally freezing. And the Bureau of Prisons actually told everybody it was okay, when in fact there were attorneys that were complaining they couldn't see their clients, and when they did, their clients were in inhumane conditions. So you had inmates being treated inhumane. You had guards working numerous hours without breaks in between. It is just absolutely out of control. Now, would that have stopped Jeffrey Epstein from committing suicide? Probably not. Okay? Epstein was very, very hell-bent on committing suicide. And I'm going to read a letter from his former cell partner in a minute to back that up. However, could anything have been done to stop that? You're damn right. There could have been numerous things that were done. The Bureau of Prisons actually cleared Epstein from a suicide watch a few days before he committed suicide. The Bureau of Prisons stated that Epstein was not supposed to be in a cell by himself. There was supposed to be another inmate with him. He was supposed to be on, even if he wasn't on a suicide watch, on a 15-minute watch, he was supposed to be being watched as well as those other inmates. Every 30 minutes, an officer was supposed to walk through that unit, and that did not happen. Now, was he killed by someone? Did one of the Clintons kill him or have him killed? Did a guard kill him? You'll never know, because the cameras that are supposed to be there were not working either. However, I can tell you most certainly that Epstein was not murdered, that he in fact did commit suicide. Nick Tartaglione is a former Mount Pleasant police officer who is currently awaiting trial, also at MCC. He was Epstein's cell partner at one point. And I received a letter from Nick on he wrote this letter on the 27th. It was postmarked the 29th, and I got it a couple days ago. And I actually know this gentleman from when he was working at Mount Pleasant Police Department, and I myself was a Mount Pleasant medic for MetroCare. Never had any problems. Anyways, here's what we're going to say. Epstein was a complete disaster. The Bureau of Prisons lost the video that shows I did not attack him. Tartaglione was actually accused of attacking Epstein the first time Epstein tried to commit suicide, or the first time that they knew he tried to commit suicide. I hear so much bullshit on how Epstein was killed by someone. He wasn't. He killed himself. I stopped him 3 times before the time he said I attacked him. He said if he did not kill himself, they will hurt people he loves. They meaning these high-profile people. Okay? He also said some interesting things about Prince Andrew. Scary how much a creep can get away with when he has money. That's just part of what was written to me. What Tartaglione, his cell partner, is saying is that he, Tartaglione, stopped Epstein from trying to commit suicide on 3 separate occasions. And then when he kept stopping him, Epstein came up with a story, told the BOP, hey, this guy, tried to attack me, blah, blah, blah. It was Epstein's way to try and get a different cell partner who maybe didn't care, or to get in a cell by himself when BOP said there's no way this guy is going to be by himself. They saw this coming. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. They saw Epstein trying to and possibly committing suicide. So now you have Tobin Noel and Michael Thomas indicted in the death of Jeffrey Epstein. You have Jeffrey Epstein will never face trial for these charges. Ms Maxwell, who is known to have recruited several people for Epstein, is magically nowhere to be found. Where is she? Nobody knows. When you have that kind of money, you can fly under the radar. And that's literally what she's doing, is flying under the radar. My suggestions from the Bureau of Prisons regarding what happened and making sure it never happens again. Oh, speaking of which, let's go back to the Bureau of Prisons, shall we? There's another high-profile inmate out there that has nothing to do with this case, but it shows the level of mistreatment by the Bureau of Prisons. Larry Lawton is a federal inmate who's out there, and he did his time. He is known as the country's biggest and best jewel thief. He turned his life around after doing 12 years. He actually helps kids avoid getting into trouble now. He's the only known honorary policeman who is a convicted felon. That said in itself, Larry Lawton took his life and turned his life around. That man, Larry Lawton, spent 11 months, at one time, 11 months in the hole where Epstein was. Not at the same facility. He was beat, he was pissed on, and he was maltreated by the guards. They spit in his food. This is what people are seeing. You're not seeing this. You're not seeing this. You, the general public, and for those of you who believe these guys deserve this, you are out of your freaking mind. Nobody deserves to be treated like an animal. Nobody. We have people who are in prison for murder that were treated better than Larry Lawton. He was pissed on by guards and nobody did anything. Who's to say that Epstein wasn't getting treated in the same way? That's what happens when the Bureau of Prisons is not policed. You cannot police the police. Okay? You have these guards working hours and hours and hours. You have no relief. You have guys getting held over. You don't have guys to come in and relieve them, period, because there's not enough personnel. You have people who are trained as teachers working as guards. Cooks working as guards. Yes, they're cross-trained, but they're taught to work at other jobs. You have electricians working as guards. So these guys are working 16 hours a day for multiple days straight because there's not enough people to fill the positions. And you know why? Because they treat their employees like shit. You treat them like shit, they're going to treat the inmates like shit. Not just that. You have some of these facilities, MCC is a perfect example. This is a holding facility. It is a warehouse. You are not treating these guys decently. You're not training them to come out and be productive members of society. You are holding them in a cell multiple hours. These guys are getting very angry. They don't want... What incentives are they getting? And then you have the guards getting angry because they're being mistreated, and it's a vicious cycle. So I'm going to end it at this. On this edition, we're going to come back and talk to you about Epstein at another date. I got other information from Nick Tartaglio, and I'm going to be passing on to you guys. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to 15 Minutes With. I hope you've enjoyed this edition. If you have enjoyed this edition of 15 Minutes With, please hit the like and the subscribe button. You can also help me keep this show going and watch it get better by donating to paypal.me/Joe Tomaso. That address again is paypal.me/JoeTomaso. 15 Minutes With is constantly looking for new content to upload and new people to interview. If you would like to share your story, or if there's someone you would like to see us interview, please email us at insidetherazorwire@gmail.com. That email address again is insidetherazorwire@gmail.com. Last but not least, again, if you like to support this channel, please subscribe and hit the like button. Until next time, we'll be seeing you